Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Grid Talk podcast. You're going to have to forgive us today because there's two very happy football fans on the show as well. Wajid is unable to join us, but we are joined by Paul. So here we
Hello.
are. I couldn't help it.
I took mine off out of respect for the fact that I've been wearing it for 3 days and I probably smell. So I've taken mine off this evening.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll let you off then.
Yeah.
How are you anyway, Paul?
I'm good. Well, what an amazing weekend we had as Newcastle fans. Finally winning a trophy after 56 years. I mean, the first trophy I've ever seen us win in my lifetime, and I've been supporting the team since 1982 or something. So yeah, incredible. It's hard to put it into words. I've tried several times over the last few days. I just can't put it. It's very difficult to explain to someone who doesn't really support a football team or any team for that matter. If you supported a team for a long time, they've never won anything, then you'll have, I guess, a degree of empathy as to how I'm feeling about it. But if you haven't, then it's very difficult for me to describe. But yeah, it was great. And then obviously the Formula 1, the Formula 2, and the Formula 3 back again at the weekend was, it was awesome.
Yeah, we'll obviously talk about the F2 and the F3 a bit more when we do the Road to F1 podcast. But in terms of the Grand Prix in Australia, very good Grand Prix, I think, in all.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like the most exciting Grand Prix of all time, but it wasn't bad. It was a good opening Grand Prix. We've had better, but it was okay. I thought what was really weird for me is I tuned in the evening to Sky Sports, as I often do in the evening when I've got nothing else to do and just want to take in the day's sports news. And more to soak up what was happening after the Newcastle game more than anything else, just to enjoy it for a change. Because last year or the year before, I remember tuning into Sky Sports and just going, "Oh, for God's sake, can we move on from Man United winning the Carabao Cup, please?" And it was just hour after hour of coverage of, "Let's go back to Melissa Reddy, who's with so-and-so legend from Man United." Piss off now. This year, of course, it was great because it was all our stuff. So I did it more for that. And while I was doing it, the Craig Slater report ran, which is always a puzzling 3 or 4 minutes of Craig Slater making shit up like Netflix and pretending that it happened in the Grand Prix. And this was no different. He made out that Carlos Sainz was a rookie. He said nothing about certain things that broke on cars, but put it down to like people making mistakes. He made out that Max Verstappen made several mistakes and went through a puddle he shouldn't have gone through, which is like, he didn't choose to go through the fucking puddle. That was about cooling his tyres down. I think you've got your wires crossed there, Craig, or you've been smoking something again. He just made up a whole load of... And then to top it off, he said it was the greatest opening Grand Prix of a new season. What?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the greatest, but I think what
it was good, but it weren't the greatest, was it?
No, I think something that gave us like a good Grand Prix this weekend is we had the rain coming. You had to make a decision. It wasn't fully wet or fully dry.
Yeah.
Or
it was
Lando
perfect in a way, wasn't it? Because we actually got running, because otherwise we wouldn't have had any running at all. And then we'd have been talking about wet tyres again today, wouldn't we?
Oh, have I not mentioned it? Yeah, apparently I am.
Well, you've not mentioned the fact that you're a Newcastle fan.
Yeah. Don't think I've ever mentioned it.
Yeah.
But
I don't think I've ever mentioned it.
No, I don't think there's not much point. We don't
at all.
Anything.
Ever.
So obviously the first subject we'll go on to is McLaren and Lando Norris. I think learning from their mistakes in the past in mixed conditions, right tyre, right time. I think, we think back to Donington back in 93, sorry. Prost having 7 pit stops to make sure he's on the right tyre. Yes, he didn't win, but he still got a podium that day, thanks to Barrichello retiring. But, it's something you have to do in them conditions. You have to be on the right one.
Yeah, you have to be on the right tyre at the right time. It's always what Jackie Stewart said, and it hasn't changed. And I keep seeing teams and drivers, for that matter, making calls that don't make any sense when you think, like, for instance, and I hate to be, the guy that bashes on the Tifosi again, but they must be sick to death of Ferrari strategy by now, and leaving them out for a lap didn't make any sense. Like, unless it was going to stop raining there and then and dry up within 2 laps, why have you stayed out on hard tyre? I mean, A, you've got the worst of the tyres anyway, because you've got the one that takes the longest to warm up. B, you already know it took 30 laps to dry out when it rained before the start of the race. So why would now be any different? So you've left them out for an extra lap where they were 8 seconds slower to get what exactly? To then pit them the lap later anyway. I mean, like, you might as well have stayed out at that point, and then it wouldn't have done you any good because you wouldn't have finished anywhere. But if you're going to gamble like that, at least have some logic behind it. And the logic, I sat there and just went, well, logic says it's going to take probably 15, 20 laps to dry out, even if it sprinkles rain for one lap. Because it's taken 30 laps to clear the stuff we had at the start of the race, and it hasn't rained. So if you know that already, and they obviously do know that, and they know it's only a short period of rain, immediately come in and change to inters, which is what, Lando did. I mean, Lando had the benefit of the fact that he went off at one point, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because then he was like, oh shit, well, I can't stay on the road, so I better go and pit. Max then did the extra lap as well. So you can't sort of say, well, yeah, Ferrari were just doing what Red Bull would do. Well, Max then came in and you still left the 2 Ferraris out. So no, you screwed both your drivers again.
Yeah, for me, I'm not sure if they in terms of Ferrari, they thought that they were going to get, a red flag period, and
I think can be the only reason they stayed out the extra lap, was because they thought it would rain harder and therefore become a red flag. But you've put your drivers in danger, which I don't think is a very smart thing to do, because you're basically saying you want the conditions to get so bad that they can't stay on the track. Is basically what you're gambling on. And then secondly, you've got a weather radar which clearly showed there was no more rain. I mean, use your brains, guys.
Yeah, I mean, we even had Zach putting his hand out at one point to make sure.
It's the ultimate acid test, right? Put your hand out in front. Is it? Yeah, it's fucking raining.
Yeah. And we had obviously Piastri going off, which made it a little bit easier for McLaren to pit their men, because the gap was suddenly...
He was a lap down by the time he came in. He might as well have stayed out another lap.
Yeah, he had to go reversing. And I've seen people go, oh, he was so clever to reverse. He didn't give up. And if it was another driver,
it's the sort of thing I think that Alonso would have done, or Hamilton would have done. It's not, or Schumacher would have done.
Yeah.
It's not unusual, but yes, I guess 75% of the grid would have probably got out of the car.
Yeah. I mean, I always look at it this way, though. The way Piastri ended up on the grass is because he took more of the grass after the gravel on the previous corner, because he took too much speed for the conditions. So Lando read him better.
No, I disagree.
For me, I didn't see Piastri slowing down in the gravel.
I agree with that, but I think it's a different assessment of it. From what I've looked at, and from what I've read, and from what I've heard from the McLaren team, was that when Lando approached that corner, they had not given him a warning that there was water already on that corner, because they didn't know.
Right.
So they didn't tell him that there was. They said rain in the last sector. That can mean anywhere from 10 or 11 basically onwards, right till the end of the lap. There was nothing. Lando had nothing through 10 and 11. So when he gets down to like 13, he's not expecting rain on the track because his engineer hasn't told him. So he goes through there and he immediately goes off and goes, oh shit, there's rain on the track. Immediately, they're going to radio Oscar. But by the time Oscar sees ahead of him, Lando going off. What's the natural reaction from a racing driver when they see a guy going off?
Well, you normally follow him.
Well, you either follow him or you're like, oh, good, I can make a really good corner here and I can overtake him, which is what went through Oscar's mind. He thought, oh, Lando's gone off. I can go through quicker and overtake him before he gets back on the track. Without realizing, his brain didn't say, oh, shit, he's gone off because of the wet. Because they weren't expecting the wet to be there. It wasn't there before. So he went through the corner worse and went deeper because he was carrying more speed, because he hadn't clocked that the reason that Lando had gone off was because the track was wet. He thought Lando had made a mistake. So he went through there at the normal pace. So that's why it ended up being the way it ended up. Yeah. And I mean, they both made an error, but a perfectly acceptable error, in the sense that happens when it rains like that, and they aren't told on the radio that there's rain in that particular corner. And let's not beat around the bush. Almost everyone spun or had a slide or went off or did something during the race. There was very few drivers that I can think of, Albon being one, Hulkenberg being another, Hamilton being another, that didn't go off the track at some point.
Yeah.
Everyone else went off the track,
Yeah, no, that's a fair point in case. But we look back to last time we had a Grand Prix like this with Lando Norris winning. Yeah. We're probably looking at Russia.
Yeah, I mean, I had Russia vibes as soon as he went off. You were just like, oh, he must be thinking about Russia. He didn't this time.
Yeah, and he made the call right. Well, it's whether he made the call right or he went for the safest call. and
whatever,
it got it right.
Yeah.
And then he had to withstand pressure from Max at the end of the race,
which he
in
hadn't
tricky
done before
conditions.
Either.
He doesn't do that often. So I think a lot of people will miss the point of drivers get a hell of a lot better at handling things once they've got that first win.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was looking forward to having it out with Wajid this evening, because if there's anyone moaning about the fact that I kept saying last year, they've never been in this position, so they don't know how to react in this position. Now they have been in this position, so now they do know how to react. And guess what? The first time they're asked a really big, serious set of pressurized questions, the team and the driver have answered them because they've learned from their experiences of last season. They didn't have these experiences last season, so they couldn't call on them. Now they do.
And for those who do wonder, yes, Lando did set the fastest lap, but he won't get the point for it.
No points anymore.
Don't have that anymore. But it was his 5th win in Formula One, so moving him up the table slowly but surely on who he's equal with. Who does it move him above? It actually moves him ahead of Carlos Sainz when he was level with Carlos Sainz before, ahead of Eddie Irvine, and ahead of Bruce McLaren, ironically.
Great.
So some decent drivers behind him.
Also puts him on 2 hat tricks as well, with Charles Leclerc and Valtteri Bottas and Kimi Räikkönen.
Yeah, if he wins one more, he goes equal with Ralf Schumacher.
Yeah, well, that's a heady list, isn't it?
And Sergio Perez and Riccardo Patrese.
How many wins do you think Lando might get this year? Would it be unreasonable to think he might get 8?
10?
Yeah, I was thinking 10 originally, but 8's not unreasonable, is it?
I mean, it all depends. I do know something came up after a race, and it's going to. We knew that around Spain, was it? They're going to do extra rear wing loading tests.
Yeah,
and now they're going to do China.
I've already heard Zach Brown say that it makes no difference to them.
Yeah, well, he's going to say that whatever, but
but he seemed really casual about it as well. He genuinely he didn't even think about the question. He just said, "Yeah, no, it's fine by us," as if like they're just not. They don't bother about it.
Have we? It's maybe a little bit of double standards by the FIA, because if that's been previous years where we've had a flexi Red Bull wing or something like that, it's been, we'll sort it in so many races time.
I mean, look, I find this quite offensive, really, that Red Bull. Basically, what Red Bull have done is they've complained that another team is cheating better than they are.
Yeah,
that's what they've complained about. Because they've been doing this for freaking years. So have Mercedes and so have Ferrari. So it's a nonsense. It really is absolutely. And there's still no known test to man that allows them to test the flexibility of a wing at high speed out on the track.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, they have to test statically. So they can ask for strengthened arms and pillars and planes and all the other stuff that they want to be strengthened. And that's fine. All the teams will do that. They've got no way of measuring how far those wings flex when they go out on the track. And some people have said, but they can mount cameras on wings these days. No. You're talking nonsense. There is a natural bend in any substance, unless you're going to put cast iron or steel on the car, which you probably can't do with the weight restrictors. So carbon fiber, by its very nature, flexes. It's the degree at which it flexes that's being called into question. And I don't think you can police it unless you ban it on front and rear wings.
Yeah. It's all about steel rear wings.
I mean, the next step is, of course, because we've already been talking about this in the past, is the FIA say, well, okay, we'll mandate the front and rear wings then. There you go. Here's the front wings that you can use. Here's the rear wings you can use. And all you can do is adjust the degree of angle of deflection on them from 0 to 20. That's it. Off you go. And that's it then. That we're basically an FIA formula, aren't we?
Formula One has always been pushing the envelope. So you push the flexibility of the wings and things like that.
Yeah. I just want to come back to the question I asked you, because this is why I asked you the question. If we think Lando might get 10 or 8, let's go in the middle. Let's go 9. If he ends up with 9 wins this season, he then has 13 wins all time, the same as David Coulthard and Alberto Ascari. And that's Lando Norris, and he'd be in 23rd all time. Isn't that mad that you can have one amazing season now and you can be in the top 23 all-time winners?
Yeah, he's currently 56th.
Yeah, it's insane, isn't it? I mean, he only has to win one more and he goes up to 43rd.
Number of Grand Prix. Oh, percentage of number of Grand Prix. I was wondering what that final chart was about. On the list I've got, and it says he's won 3.8%.
He's won what?
So 3.8% of his Grand Prix.
I was going to say it's not very high. I mean, that's the other thing about modern Grand Prix drivers, other than the old ones like Verstappen and Hamilton. The majority of the modern drivers have terrible percentage because they have, like Fangio. Fangio's is insane. Clark's is pretty much insane as well. Senna's is pretty insane, even for a guy that did 160 Grand Prix. So, but the modern ones, when we've got Alonso on, what is he on now? 400 and something or other. I mean, it's nuts, right?
Yeah, he's won 7% of his races, and it's dropping per race.
Yeah, I mean, every single race.
Yeah,
anyway,
so obviously with Lando, it was a strong result. We've got ATS Travels in the chat says great non-bottle by Oscar. He kept his cool, but is he going to rule this one for a long time? I mean, is going to play in his mind?
Yeah, I think if you'd said to him after qualifying, what's the ideal race result, he would have said,
"Oh, there we go."
Or he'd said, "What's that?"
ATS Travels is Wajid.
He's an
annoying Paul in spirit.
Yeah, I mean, I think Oscar would look at it and go, 2 points is a disaster. Particularly when he knows that car is probably the most dominant. And for the first few races of this year, I think it's going to be the car to beat, right?
Yeah.
And I think in China, we might even see a bigger gap than we saw here. I think Australia kind of flattered a couple of teams, particularly Red Bull and a little bit Mercedes as well. So I think maybe in China, they're even better, which is a little bit worrying for the rest of the season because we could end up with just a massively dominant McLaren. And then we need Oscar to step up to have a decent championship. Otherwise, it's just going to be a Lando Norris walkaway. And I think, he, when we've looked at dominant cars in previous years, and I don't want to use too many, but the biggest analogy I can give you is 88 with McLaren when they had Senna and Prost. And that's because Senna went out of the first race and it took him 12 of the 16 races to get back on an even kill. And that was winning 9 of those. So it's like, or 8 rather. So I think it hurts a driver when they know they've got the dominant car if they make a mistake early on. And, I'm saying they both made a mistake and Oscar didn't get away with it and Lando did. But, yeah, I think he might look back at this as a painful way to start the season. But who knows? There's so many races these days. It's not like we have 15 or 16 anymore. We have 24. Yeah. So I think with 23 left, will Lando make one mistake and only pick up 2 points? I think it's possible, right? Will they have some unreliability at some point that might afflict one or the other? Probably. At least one race, right? So, yeah, I think it's early enough. If this had been 4 races to go and Lando opens up a 23-point lead in one race, then I think, that's kind of game over, isn't it? Because you can't come back from that. But this early, I think he's probably
okay. Wajid says on Skycoms they made it out for seasons. Everyone had Max versus Lando. Yeah, it does seem to be that shout out because obviously we want it to continue from last season. Yeah. But I
mean, they did try and plug a number of narratives that were not real,
questionable.
Yeah.
Well, they've just been learning off Netflix. It's fine. Yeah. Obviously, from there, we have a look at who comes second. It was Max Verstappen who came in second.
Yeah.
Came home. He was 8/10 off Lando at the end. Obviously, the rain, I think, flattered him a little bit.
Yeah.
So obviously, he does have better pace in the rain than most people. But he managed to put it third on the grid. Decent weekend in whole. And then we had... So I'm just moving results across, so I'm not looking over. Liam Lawson, who was in the number 2, starting from pit lane because he fell out of Q1.
Yeah, Max, I don't have to spend much time on Max. We all know how good he is, and we know how good he is in the rain he is. That Red Bull was not a good car on Friday. It was not a good car on Saturday morning either. And then somehow they've managed to get it into a place where it was reasonably drivable on the Saturday, and Max has done probably as good a job as he can do finishing the top 3 like that. And obviously getting second in the race was great. He was very close at the end to Lando, mainly because Lando made a mistake in turn 6 on the last few laps. But other than that, I think had we not had the rain, I think we saw when the track tried to dry out, we saw Max going backwards. And that wasn't just because his tyres had gone off. It was just because that car is not very good in the dry. And they've got a lot of work. There's absolutely a ton of work to do on that Red Bull. I think they're probably at the moment the third best team. But because of Max, they're able to pick up more points than perhaps they should. We might look back at this in 5 or 6 races and go, wow, remember when he finished second? He hasn't had a podium since. It's that kind of car. So we'll see. And I think the best example of how bad this car was is because you look at Liam Lawson, right? And I don't buy into this whole, but he's a rookie and he's never driven F1 Red Bull. No, he's got 11 Grand Prix for crying out loud. He's not a rookie.
Yeah.
He's a first-time full season rookie, if you want to call it, but he's had 2 years of experience in 2 different cars. So he knows how to do it, and he was fairly close throughout practice, and then in the qualifying, obviously, he blew it. And that it's not a great start when you're replacing a man that basically blew it every time he got in the car last season, and the end result is that Sergio's not in the car this season. So Liam will know that. He also knows that if he doesn't do something in the first 4 or 5 races, Yuki Tsunoda is just going to take over in this car, isn't he? Because all the time that Yuki has a weekend like he's had, and I think 12th is a disgusting return on basically what was a brilliant weekend from Yuki Tsunoda all weekend until his team made a shit pit call, basically, and screwed him. Other than that, he drove flawlessly for the whole race. Didn't make a mistake either. Ran up in the top 5, ran ahead of the Ferraris, looked pretty comfortable in the right. Like, he did everything right. So if that's going to continue, Liam's going to need a couple of really good results in the next 3 or 4 races because this was awful in every way.
Do you think it was slightly different with Liam, though? Because he did come out, he did go, I shouldn't be spinning. We know he's hard on himself.
Yeah.
But
I like the honesty.
Unlike Sergio and Albon and Gasly, it was always somebody else. It was something else.
Yeah, I like the fact that he owned it. I don't know that that's really going to help him much, though, because ultimately, if he doesn't bring the car home and get strong points, the least he should be doing is finishing in the top 8, and he hasn't done that. And he's had a silly accident, really. I know that I think that the accident was caused by a banging of wheels with Gabriel Bortoleto before that accident actually happened, because Bortoleto's suspension broke as he spun into turn 1.
Yeah.
And that was after they banged wheels a couple of corners before. So I think it wasn't all his fault. They'd obviously had a coming together which hurt both drivers. But again, like, why are you doing that?
Well, to be fair, he shouldn't be fighting.
No, exactly. He shouldn't be back there fighting.
The half the problem with Perez.
You can't really sum it up any more than it was a very poor race and a poor weekend from Liam Lawson. Of all the rookies, you think of all the rookies, and you've got some first-time starters in here. You've got Jack Doohan, who's had at least 1 Grand Prix. You've got Oliver Bim, who's done 3. You've done Liam Lawson, who's had 10. So actually, only Isaac Hadjar and Gabriel Bortoleto and Antonelli are actually true rookies, as in, like, have never done a Grand Prix. And I think all 3 of them had a better weekend than Liam Lawson did.
I mean, we said it before. We said about Yuki, so we could speak about the RBs as well while we're here. Yuki had a great weekend apart from that second half of a race, basically.
Last 12 laps.
And even the RB was quicker than, Lawson's practice times. Yes, he wasn't too far off, but he was still 15th, 16th.
Yeah.
He never really got into the top 10 all weekend. And then you had Isaac Hadjar coming out pacey, very pacey. Yes, a silly mistake in the race. But then we saw other people do the same. But it's not the best of starts for him.
No, not the best of starts for any of the rookies, bar Antonelli. Who of the rookies had a great weekend, really? If you want to talk about the whole weekend, and that's the race, qualifying, practice, who had a great weekend other than Antonelli?
I think compared to how he was expected to go, I think Bortoleto didn't have a bad weekend.
No, not a bad weekend, but it was nothing outstanding. At least the out qualifying of Hulkenberg, I think, is impressive.
Yeah.
And then if he'd actually been able to hold it on the road and stay in, he might have picked up some points. But we'll never know now.
No, it's one of them.
But it was a tough weekend for rookies, right? And I think that kind of weather. I spoke a little bit about this yesterday on my stream, and I want to bring it up again, just as a wrap-up, really. I think a lot is made of the rookies all making mistakes over the weekend, and they're going to make mistakes, right? They are going to make mistakes this season. All of them are. Every single one of them, whether you want to call Lawson the rookie or not, they're all going to make mistakes. Now, the other thing is these hybrid cars, have a ridiculous amount of torque. and are very light in comparison to our road cars, for instance, somewhere in the region of either half or a third of the weight of our general road cars, right? So it's very hard for us to understand the level of torque these things have, and the least amount of weight. So putting the power down is really tricky in these cars. It always has been. So they develop what's called throttle maps, and they stick with that throttle map. Once they go to qualifying, that's it. They don't get a chance to turn it off or turn it up or down. That's it. There's no more of that turning up and down the engines anymore. They go with that throttle map. So the majority of the guys will have had to set that on Saturday, having no wet running. So they've had to have gone into Sunday with a throttle map. They'd have no idea what it would do, and they've had one lap to get that right, and that's the formation lap. And Isaac Hadjar has had a torque spin. Basically, what's happened is he's put the power down and not expected it to go, and the torque has just come in like a bang, and that's throttle mapping. It's as simple as that. I know I'm trying to make mistakes. I'm trying to make light of their mistakes. I'm not, because it is a mistake still. But my point is more that would have been the first lap he'd have ever driven in that car with the throttle map setting that he had, and they'd have had a good guess at it on Saturday. Simple as that, right? So he spins out on that. Jack Doohan has the same thing. He has a torque spin as well. And then the third driver that had that was Carlos Sainz. And Carlos was the only one who came on the radio and said, guys, I had some unusual torque. Yeah. And immediately Williams said, we had the wrong throttle map, and Carlos was a victim of that, unfortunately. So they then make an excuse for their driver. I think the same has happened for Jack Doohan and Isaac Hadjar, and their teams haven't come out and defended them. And I think, frankly, they should have.
In terms of Hadjar, we know he's a very emotional driver.
He is very emotional. Way too emotional for F1.
We've mentioned it a few times. And Helmut Marko came out saying it was a bit embarrassing that he got into tears, and Anthony Hamilton had to put his arm around him to console him. Do you think that's a start of us seeing this really emotional Hadjar who thinks, right, I've got the pace. I can do this in Formula One. I need to be up there quickly because Red Bull are very good at handing out P45s.
You could be right, but I think it's too early. I think one race, one swallow doesn't make a summer and all that. I think it's an unusual weekend where many of the setups that drivers would have made would have been geared towards wet. And I think Racing Bulls were the opposite. I think they just decided to go and try and maximize their qualifying. And then in the race, who knows where he would have finished. So we don't know now is the honest answer. But I think it will give him confidence that he wasn't that far away from Tsunoda over a single lap. But he does need to calm down if he wants to be an F1 driver. I like emotional drivers. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of Alesi and Montoya and Raikkonen and Villeneuve, and all of these guys have one thing in common. They're all very emotional, right? I love that about them. Hadjar doesn't have that kind of aura and the speed around him to carry that off. So what he needs to do is calm the fuck down and treat each weekend very methodically. The same as Piastri. I mean, Piastri is the most boring driver. He really is. He's thoroughly boring. Everything's at like half pace for him. He's wandering off looking at the sky and looking at what's on the TV while he's going around the track. He's got so much capacity left over. But I get the opposite impression about Hadjar. Hadjar is literally like, oh my God, there's a fucking corner. Oh my God, it's 125 miles an hour. What fucking gear am I in? Oh my God, I've got to do some opposite locking now. And he's got no capacity left for anything else, including people talking to him on the radio. Shut the fuck up! Like I can't concentrate. It's almost like it's almost too intense, really. And he's got to find a way of calming that down a bit. I don't particularly rate him. I think he was very lucky to be where he was at the right time, right place in terms of Red Bull and promoting him. I think there were a lot of other drivers who have not been in F1 over the last 2 or 3 seasons that have beaten Hadjar and should be way ahead of him in the pecking order. It's just circumstance, right? It's how it happens sometimes. He's the right place, right time. But he's got to maximise that opportunity. Otherwise, he'll find himself out of that team as well, because there's plenty behind him coming through as well. So, he's the one looking forward thinking, aha, I can take one of these big guys' seats. But there's 4 or 5 of them behind him all looking at his seat as well. So it's just the way the Red Bull hierarchy goes, right?
And we know one of them in Arvid Lindblad already has his super license points.
Yeah, he does.
So he doesn't need to finish F2 this year.
Nope. No, but he can finish outside the top 5 in F2 this year and still have 45 super license points. All he needs to do is pass his driving test and become 18, which he does on the 8th of August.
Well, we went through in the prediction where we thought teams would finish, but Mercedes, we would kind of say were a bit of a surprise this weekend. They had a bit more pace than some expected, and George Russell getting himself up onto a podium. Very generally quiet race for George, to be fair. And he didn't really have anybody right behind him, didn't have anybody right in front of him, just tootled along and managed to finish 8 seconds off the lead, which is quite a gap to lose in the last few laps.
Yeah.
What did they have? 6 laps to go at the end.
Yeah.
But then he probably knew he didn't have the pace to keep them.
Yeah, I mean, he had like a 7-second lead over Albon at the time, so I think he probably just thought, let's just bring the car home. Everyone else has been off the road by then as well. Don't forget, he's one of the few. I think I counted 4 drivers that hadn't gone off the road at any time in the race, and he was one of them. He just had one of those George Russell drives, it's just kind of like quiet, kept himself out of mischief, didn't really challenge anyone. No one could challenge him. Brings the car home, picks up a podium. And I think with Antonelli alongside him in 4th, I think that, if you'd said 27-point haul from race 1, they'd have bitten your hand off, because they haven't had that kind of haul from a first race for 5 years.
Yeah, and just to reply to Blizzard, no, we actually turned right on this podcast as well. So it's not a NASCAR podcast. So we obviously, it was a decent start for George Russell, very quiet, did what he needed to do all weekend. We can now turn to the boy wonder, as Toto Wolff would like to call him, Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Started 16th, poor qualifying, made a mistake which damaged his car, and then had to come through the field. Had a quietish first half of the race, but then made the difference when the rain came.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've heard people say that it was underwhelming as a debut, and I'm like, give me a break. This kid is 18 years of age, right?
Yeah.
This kid is 18 years of age. He's in his first race replacing Lewis Hamilton, and he's gone from 16th on the grid, albeit there because he made a mistake and damaged his car, and therefore the bib got broken, and therefore he had no downforce. Fine. Yeah. But he's going to make mistakes. But the measure of the man is, how do you come back from the mistakes? And he's driven from 16th to 4th in probably the most difficult conditions we've seen in F1 for a long time, where a previous world champion threw it into the wall, by the way.
Yeah.
And another former McLaren guy threw it into the wall before the race had even started properly. And then all the other 3 rookies also binned it. So, sorry, what was not impressive about being the guy that overtook more cars than anyone else on the track during a slippery, changeable condition race? 16th to 4th, and we're not raving about it, and we're not giving him driver of the day? The fuck are you people on?
I'll be honest, in my sort of viewpoint, maybe it's because Toto's put so much oomph into, PR
Absolutely.
work.
No, I get that. I do. No, David, I get that part of it. I get that. I get that, to finish 4th behind his teammate, not great, really, is it? Because, he should be beating your teammate.
Yeah.
It's his first fucking race, for crying out loud. George Russell's in his 7th season. Give the guy a break. We all gave Piastri a break when he didn't beat Lando in the first 8 races.
I honestly think for me, it's partly the PR machine that's behind Kimi that's made me say
Sure,
this.
I get that can annoy people, right? Because everyone's going, "Oh, he's the next Verstappen, he's the next Jim Clark, he's the next
Monza.
whatever." I get it. I get
the
that
Monza
part,
stuff where you're going through corners and they're going, "Oh, he went 20 miles an hour quicker than anybody else." Well, there's a reason he ended up in the wall.
Yeah, exactly. That's because he crashed that lap.
And I think, I'll give him these cars when they get damaged. That's it, kind of thing. You do.
I mean, he broke the bib on the front of the car. Now, for those of you who don't know, you break the bib on this car, you're done. Like it sits too low. Basically, it scrapes along the ground, literally causing actual drag to the car.
Yeah.
And he lost over a second a lap, and he did well to have only a second lost a lap. To be honest, I don't know how he did that. But he broke the car, and that was his fault. So I get it, but at the same time, he drove a broken car in Q2 and therefore qualified 16th. So okay, that's how it happens sometimes.
Wajid said Merck did what Red Bull did a few years ago, which was get the max that they could out of a situation.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. Yeah, they did.
To be honest, I
extracted everything they could out of that car this weekend.
I think if you gave him 3rd and 4th at the start of the weekend, taking it after qualifying, definitely taking it. But they got so many points on Ferrari. I think that's a big thing for them.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a really good start for them, because it will be close this season between all 4 teams, especially the 3 behind McLaren, presumably. So when they can maximise the amount, but like I said, it's the best haul of points in an opening race for 5 years. Like, They haven't started seasons well, have they? Let's face it, every season for the last 3 at least, they've started on the back foot. This season, it seems like they've actually got a reasonably well-driven car. It's not the fastest, but it's actually a really easy car to drive. So, great. That's a good start because that's much better than last year. Also, it seems like potentially they're okay with heat now as well. That would be nice for them, wouldn't it? To be actually able to drive in reasonable conditions rather than waiting for it to be -5. So, yeah, I think, great start. But I just want to finish off on Antonelli as well.
Yeah.
Last year, we raved about Oliver Bierman when he made his debut. Right, he came into Ferrari. He qualified 11th, went out in Q2, and he finished 7th. And everyone raved about him. Everyone raved about what a great debut it was, and it was a good debut.
Yeah.
But I just want to remind everyone, he finished 25 seconds behind his teammate in a 50-lap race. He was half a second slower than his teammate in the same car. We're not raving about Antonelli, who finishes 3 seconds behind his teammate in a wet, changeable race. Hello?
Mate, I can only gather some people, this isn't myself, but I gather that some people might think of it as George Russell, we don't see him as a world championship material, whereas Kimi Antonelli...
You mean the guy that outdrove a 7-times world champion for 2 seasons in a row? That guy, yeah?
Well, there's some question marks behind that one, but in terms of Kimi coming in, who were the last ones which we had this much hype about? We had Lewis Hamilton, stuck it on podium, almost led the Australian Grand Prix at times that season, and Max Verstappen, who obviously came in a lower down car, but the first time he did have a car, he won.
Yep.
So I presume that's where some people's sort of predictions may come from.
But then, how many races have Mercedes won in the last 4 years?
Well,
4.
Yeah.
It's not like he's joined a world championship winning team.
No,
that are at the front of F1. So I don't know. I thought it was a really good debut, and I thought it was probably driver of the day. I mean, Lando wins driver of the day because he won the race, but he made a mistake as well. He's very lucky to get away with it.
Yeah, and we'll quickly go on to Ferrari because we have mentioned them already. Obviously, not 8th and 10th. Was it 8th and 10th in the end that they actually got? Yes, it was.
Where do you start with them?
In the
I've already done the whole Ferrari strategy thing, so let's not meme on that one. I suppose. I mean, the bottom line is they come away with 5 points, which you might say is quite lucky in a way at the end because they actually could have ended up with none. It's only the fact that we only had 14 cars running they actually got any points. So, yeah, not a good weekend anyway. I think Lewis probably closer to Leclerc in qualifying than I thought he would be, which is weird. I know a lot of people were hyped and saying, "Oh, he's going to get pole and he's going to beat Leclerc in the same car." No. As far as I'm concerned, he was never going to do that, especially not in the first race. He might do it occasionally this year, but I don't think he'll do it on a regular way. Charles Leclerc is the single fastest driver of a single lap. Simple as that. But Hamilton, I think, is a better race driver. And once he gets to grips with the car and the team and the strategy and his K1 button, he'll be much better for it. So I'm surprised he wasn't further away, actually, from Leclerc. I think Leclerc has not had a good weekend. And Ferrari as a whole haven't had a very good weekend. And Lewis has had an okay weekend. But not really well championship winning form, is it, Wajid?
No, I mean, if you go through the practice sessions, pretty much top 5 even at times for Lewis and Charles. Both had their shots. Just first practice, Lewis was down in 12th. But as you say, he's got a lot to learn. And I suppose for Lewis, I know we're talking about a 7-time world champion, but we're talking about a guy who's literally driven a Mercedes engine only.
Yeah.
And the talks are so different, the way it drives, the way the car drives. And philosophy, for the last 2 years, he's had to fight the zero pod concept. And they're still trying to find a peak setup for this Ferrari. So, are we kind of dismissing Ferrari and saying they've got a constant car, but it won't win Grand Prix or what?
No. I'm definitely not saying that. I think they've had a poor weekend. I think 5 points is a terrible haul of points for a team that are at least the 4th best team, and therefore they've basically finished as the 5th best team and been beaten by a Sauber, an Aston Martin, and a Williams, which they should be really worried about, frankly. And yes, a lot of that was down to strategy, but again, why are we still making the same strategies that we've been making for the last 15 years? That needs to change. Something needs to change at Ferrari. We said that all last season, right? It has to change.
Yeah.
That's a separate incident. The team itself and the core of the car seems okay. And they know that they've got two great drivers. So I don't think this is like the end of the world for Ferrari, but I think it's a terrible start for a season where they're putting basically all their eggs in one basket to try and challenge for both titles. And 8th and 10th in the opening race is not where you want to be if you're going to do that, is it? So, not great. Is it where they're at? No, absolutely not. They're definitely the second fastest car, so that's good. They do need to find a sweet spot for it for both drivers.
Yeah.
And it obviously doesn't work particularly well in mixed settings like this. So I think they probably went more dry on Saturday, and that's cost them in the race because neither of them could pass anyone. I mean, how long was Hamilton stuck behind Albon and Tsunoda? Like 20 laps or something. Like, you couldn't get past either of them. So they obviously went for a dry setup on the Saturday, which hurt them on the Sunday, believing that perhaps it would dry out quicker on the Sunday. So I get it, but I think they took too many risks over the weekend trying to find edges that they didn't have. And China, hopefully, when it's dry, we'll see a bit more of a representative pace from them.
Well, they only finished about 3 seconds apart from each other with the 6 laps that were gone, and that's with Lewis fighting Oscar for a period of time.
Yeah, I don't think you can really measure where they pair. I mean, they ran pretty close during. I think Charles had about a 7-second lead at one point over Lewis. It wasn't much though. So I think they're fairly even in terms of race pace already, which bodes well for Lewis going through the season if he can keep that up, because I think he will get quicker as he adapts to the car and the engine.
Yeah. Obviously, we'll now quickly look. Obviously, Kimi Antonelli, second youngest driver to score points.
No. Youngest driver to score points on his debut. There you go. That's the record.
Totally.
Yes, but what sort of record? That's not a record. He didn't beat Max, did he?
Yeah, but he did beat Lance Stroll.
Yeah, well, okay, great. So I've beaten Stroll and I'm still behind Verstappen. I'll take that record. Right, why not say he's the youngest driver to ever score points on his debut? Why not use that one?
I don't know. I just always think there's... I always think points on debut...
He set a record! We give him a record like that way. If we sell it the other way, he's just joined a club, hasn't he? Big deal.
Points on debut is a weird one because a lot of people do seem to score points on debut.
Yes, they do. And it's because we have a top 10 now. That's partly why. Yeah. But when we had 6, it was much harder. When Johnny Herbert finished 4th in Brazil on his debut, everyone raved about it in 1989 because it was such an unusual thing to happen back then. In fact, we actually had 2 that year. We had Johnny Herbert do it in the Benetton. We had John Alesi do it in the Tyrrell. They both finished 4th on debut. It was very rare that it happened, and then we had 2 in one season. And it's because we only did top 6, obviously, for points back then as well.
Well, we've talked about sort of big teams, but actually in Australia, we had 3 drivers who have had very little said about, who did really good drives. We got Alex Albon in 5th. He was 4th before Antonelli's penalty was turned back over, which we haven't seen before. A unsafe release turned over with fresh evidence.
It wasn't fresh evidence. It was a fresh camera.
Yeah.
That means.
It's a very strange one, but it does...
Very strange.
Do I dare say it does keep to this narrative that Antonelli's the next big thing, and maybe that helped him?
I don't know why. I mean, I'm a big Antonelli fan, obviously, and I'm a big supporter, but even I thought that was an unsafe release.
Yeah. So we had Alex Albon 5th, scoring more points for Williams than he did last season, I think.
In one race?
Nearly. In one race, yeah.
Yeah, nearly.
Nico Hulkenberg in 7th. That was mentioned a few times in terms of Sauber scoring more points than the whole team did last season. Scoring 6th this weekend from 17th on the grid.
Yep.
And actually, 6th place, the heavily criticised, uninterested prisoner number 18, it's Lance Stroll.
Come in, prisoner 18. Your time is up. Yeah, I mean, look, you've highlighted all 3, and I think it's worth talking about all 3 as a collective, really, because they did go very quietly over the weekend. No one really talked about them too much. I think, firstly, let's talk about Albon. Albon, I thought, all the hype is around his teammate. Everyone's talking about Carlos Sainz being fastest in testing. Everyone asking if Williams could transfer that speed over. Then it looks like actually they can, and they do have the 5th fastest car on the grid, and maybe even the 4th fastest car in qualifying, which is insane, really. But fabulous for Williams, and real, all that hype I gave him before the season started. And I actually had a couple of members of the team tell me they were really pumped up for this season. And now I know why, because they actually were the 5th best team. Great for them, and then a solid qualifying. Both of them get through to Q3 and you're thinking, okay, this is good now. Science will stamp his mark. And actually, no. Actually, Albon will start higher up. So I thought that was really interesting because that's a one-up thing over a lap. Yeah. But okay, it's a lap. And then, of course, the race, Science spins it on lap 1, which in a weird way, I think Alex will sit there and go, well, I didn't make any mistakes. And I finished 5th and I scored 10 points. I've scored literally almost as much as I got last season for the whole season, which was 12, by the way. He scored 10 in one race.
Yeah.
And that's how competitive this Williams is going to be this season. Anytime the top 4 teams make a mistake or crash out or don't finish, these Williams need to score a shit ton of points because they're not going to get the chance in the second half of the season. So big result for Williams, big result for Albon. And I think it helps him understand actually he's got the measure of Science and they can actually be a very competitive team now between the two. I was very worried because I felt like Science might kick Albon's ass and that might cause him to go spiraling downwards. This is the perfect start for him.
Well, you mentioned Science quickly.
Yes.
Obviously Williams, disappointed, said, we got the wrong torque map.
Yeah.
But it shows what Science has brought into that he sat there on the pit wall. He told them when to go and slick tyres.
Yep.
So they got it right for Albon and used all his experience.
Of all the things that you could ever say about Carlos, he's never been not a team player. Yeah. All that time at Ferrari when he could have done stuff, could have made it very awkward, which never did. He's always played a good teammate. Did it at McLaren, did it at Renault. Didn't really do it at Toro Rosso, but probably wouldn't have done it in his first year anyway. But other than that, he's always been a really good team player. And Williams are going to benefit from that. Honestly, they really are. Lance Stroll, 6th. I mean, not a particularly great drive. You have to, I watched him in the early part and he was just trundling around like he just couldn't be bothered. And I wouldn't say he's a wet weather specialist, but if he's gone well in any weathers, it's always these kind of weathers, isn't it?
Mixed.
You think back and you think mixed conditions, rain. He's always gone quite well in those. And this was no different. And the fact that he's vastly more experienced world champion teammate binned it, and he finished in 6th to pick up 8 points. Kudos to him. I think it's a flash in the pan, but yeah, good for him. Hulkenberg in 7th, I think, is more impressive in many ways because actually he was trying to get Stroll on the last lap, and he was having to fend off Leclerc in a Ferrari on the last lap. No mean feat, right? In a car which, honestly, is probably the 9th quickest car on the grid. Only the Haas is slower. And even in qualifying, I think the Haas is quicker, weirdly. I think over one lap, the Haas
we didn't expect Haas to be as low down, did we?
Well, I did. You guys didn't. I did because I'd seen all the data from testing. And I said they were the 9th or 10th slowest car. So it wasn't a surprise to me.
I didn't expect them to be as slow in qualifying as such.
No, and then in the race, I think, again, from what I've heard, they both put dry setups on, which obviously hurt them really badly. They thought it was going to dry out very quickly in the race, and it didn't. It took 30 laps to dry out, so they were penalised for that. But they were absolutely nowhere in the race, and Ollie Beerman was absolutely terrible for the weekend. I mean, he's made a very poor mistake on Friday, which has cost him his whole weekend, effectively, and he never recovered. And I hope that it hasn't dented his confidence because he is a good driver. But I think Ocon's going to show him the way for the first half of the season, and he'll be lucky to survive if he carries on doing stuff like that. That's for sure. But yeah, great drive from Hulkenberg. 6 points on the board. Sauber might not score another point for the rest of the season. Yeah. And so this is massive in many ways, not just for the team, but money wise, it means they're guaranteed constructors' money now for next season. They're guaranteed travel money, which is all really Audi ever want to get out of this season, depending on whether they actually do come in next season or not. As far as I know, they are. They just want to get this season done with. And the fact that they've got points now means they can just go, fuck it then. We've got points. We're safe. We've got the travel stipend. We've got championship points. We've got money coming in for next season. Fuck it. Let's move on and still really start looking at 26, which I already know they're starting to do anyway. So I think this just weirdly accelerates their 26 program by getting points early on. But a great result, nevertheless.
Yeah, and from the lap data, Bortoleto was right behind Hulkenberg. Obviously, when the pit stops come, whether that would work out, I don't know. But
I mean, I think it's reasonable to say that he could have finished in the points if he'd stayed on the road.
Yeah, and Hulkenberg, actually the first driver ever to continue his Formula One career after being at Haas.
Oh God, yeah.
So it's normally the career ender. And actually, he's just come back and scored points straight away. So it's not only just scored points, but he's obviously, continued being as quick. Quick look at the chat. Closey, Aussie GP was my first ever live Grand Prix. Absolutely unreal experience. And yeah, it's wet as well in Australia. That's a new one.
Yeah, it was a good first Grand Prix, I guess.
And Will says it's Lando season.
It's Lando season. Yeah, I think it
is so far.
Yeah, I think it probably is, but we'll see.
We'll move on to our predictions that we had last week. Now, I'll bring them up along the bottom.
Wait, hold on. Before we move on to predictions.
Yeah. Have I missed something?
Well, I think Hulkenberg is the first driver in history to score points for 8 different teams.
8 different teams. So he scored for Williams.
Yeah, I was trying to add it up in my head. So it's Williams, Force India, then Renault.
I'll tell you what I'll do.
Then Racing Point, then Aston Martin, then Haas, then Sauber. So it's 7. So where have I got 8 from? What have I thought?
He's done Sauber twice.
Oh, he's done Sauber twice, hasn't he? That's why. Yes. Yeah, because he's effectively in the Sauber now. So yeah, same team effectively, I suppose. But next season it'll be with Audi, which will be 8 teams. So he needs to score a point next.
Technically, they are called stake.
So well, they're called Stake F1 Team Sauber, and they were called Sauber F1 Team something or other last time. I can't remember what they were. They BMW? No, they weren't BMW, were they?
It was. So he's raced for AT&T Williams.
Yes.
Force India.
Yes.
Sahara Force India.
Yeah, same team.
Yeah. Sauber F1.
Yeah.
Then he went back to Force India.
Yeah.
Renault.
Yeah.
Well, Renault Sport F1 team and then Renault F1 team.
Same team.
I'm trying to think if they had official
during his career, you'd have to say it was the same team.
Yeah. Then he went for Racing Point,
which were a different team technically, the Force India, because they were registered as such.
Yeah.
And Aston Martin were different as well because they were a different team.
Haas. And then Stake F1 team kick Sauber.
Yeah. So it's 17. So he needs to do one more season next year with Audi and score a point in Audi, and then he will have scored points for 8 different teams, and that'll be a new record.
And this is the thing, like he's
crazy, isn't it?
He's not been on the podium. That's obviously dug at him all the time. But he is such a reliable driver.
Yeah. You think he made his debut in 2009.
Yeah, and took pole in Brazil.
Yes, for the Williams.
And who was he fighting then? It was Barrichello, wasn't it?
2009.
So Picky has said prediction: Hulkenberg will still miss the podium this year.
Yeah, I think that's
quite.
Prediction. Well done,
that's
mate.
A strong one on your bingo card. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think you've done well there, mate. Was it not Felipe Massa back then?
No, 2009.
Oh, 9 was 9 was the pole position you're talking about, right?
Yeah, so he
in Brazil. Yeah, so 2008 was his first season, though, wasn't it?
No, 2009.
No, 2009. You're right. Yeah.
He was test and reserve driver.
Yes, it was 2009. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So he came in 2009.
Yeah, but 2009, Barrichello was at Brawn. So
no, sorry, 2010.
Rosberg, wouldn't it?
2010, because in 2009 he won the GP2 series. He was test driver at Williams.
Oh, I thought it was. Hang on, was it? Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. 09 was it was his championship year. So it would have been.
So he came in 2010, took that one pole position.
Was it Rosberg? Or was it? Oh, no, he'd gone to Mercedes.
No,
so
2010 was still Barrichello. It was Barrichello.
That was Barrichello.
It was Barrichello's first season. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then he was teammates to
Suzuki.
Perez. No. Where's he gone now?
Anyway, it's fine. Yeah, so it's 7 teams, 8 next. So moving on. I hijacked you a little bit there. Sorry about that.
2011, he didn't race. He was test driver at Force India.
Right.
So he had a bit of a break. He likes having breaks.
He does, yeah. He's had several of those.
He's one of them.
Keeps coming back. He's like a bad smell.
What we'll now do is have a look at the predictions we had between us all.
Okay.
I don't think this is going to go down too well. So I'll be running across the bottom of your screen, and I will read them out as well. So in qualifying, Wajid had Gasly in P5. He had a surprising P5, but it was Yuki Tsunoda. Verstappen 4th, no. Hamilton 3rd, no. Norris 2nd, no. Leclerc 1st. Okay, so Wajid, give up. Myself, Verstappen 5th, no. Piastri 4th, no. Hamilton 3rd, no. Leclerc 2nd, no. Norris pole. Hey, we got one. And Paul, you went for Russell 5th, 1 off. 4th, Hamilton. Piastri 3rd. Norris 2nd, and Leclerc in 1st.
Yep. I got 3 of them with 1 out.
So we've had 15 predictions so far.
Yeah, and
we've
got 1 right.
1 point. Yeah.
Like it.
And we'll move on to race.
I hope you're keeping a league table of this for the season.
Oh, I will do. Not what's wrong, but the amount of points.
Yeah.
Race predictions for Australia, we had Wajid said Norris in 5th, Leclerc in 4th, Russell in 3rd. Oh, we get a point. Hamilton, and then Verstappen to win. So 1 point for Wajid.
Yeah.
Myself,
just before I say mine were pretty wild. I did go all out there.
Yeah, you did go a bit fancy with it, and you might have got 1 point if Piastri had stayed on the track.
Yeah.
I said Piastri 5th, Norris 4th, Verstappen 3rd, Leclerc 2nd, and Hamilton 1st. I had a Ferrari 1 too.
Yeah.
And Paul, do you remember yours?
I did Gasly in 5th, Sainz in 4th, and then Hamilton, Piastri, and Verstappen. I thought Lando was going to bin it.
So nil point.
None for me.
So that means out of it all, we got
2 points.
2 points out of 30.
1 for you and 1 for Wajid. Brilliant.
2 out of 30. Pop that in the chat for all of you that may not hear my accent. But 2 out of 30.
We're not good at predictions. Let's not do predictions anymore.
Blizzard said you guys are missing it. A pod of dolphins are swimming around the Crew 9 capsule.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
It's not really an F1.
Also, Zach Wilson has signed for the Dolphins. There you go. That's 1 for Blizz.
Well, to be fair, it's still better than our predictions. So, right.
Terrible.
Amazingly enough, we have a Grand Prix this weekend.
We do.
So we're going to give this another try. At least one more.
All right.
So I will just put Wajid into chat while you have a quick think, because he sent his over, which is still slightly relying on a decent Ferrari.
Okay. He hasn't learned his lesson then.
No, he hasn't learned his lesson yet. So
okay.
The fanboy in him is still there. So he's gone.
What is hang on.
Go on.
No, it's all right. You carry on. I'm just looking something up.
Forecast.
Yeah. I think it was dry, but I can't remember. Yeah, it's dry. Okay. In fact, Friday and Saturday are pretty warm, like 23, 24 degrees. Sunday's a bit cloudy, but other than that...
You had to change every single one of your drivers on predictions, didn't you, Wajid? And then not turn up to type him in for me.
You're getting told off by the headmaster now, Wajid.
So Wajid has got Lewis Hamilton in 5th, Russell in 4th, Verstappen 3rd, Leclerc 2nd on the grid, and Norris 1st. So no Piastri again for Wajid.
Yeah.
Myself, you say it's going to be dry, don't you? So I'm actually going to go Verstappen in 5th. Piastri will not be 4th because that is not where I think it's going to be. I'm going to put... There we go. So I'm going to go Verstappen 5th, Russell 4th, Hamilton 3rd, Piastri 2nd, and Norris on pole. So we'll have another front row.
Okay.
Back out. And yourself?
I'm going to do 5th George Russell.
Oh, I just deleted him thinking you were going to go different.
Oh.
Yeah.
5th George Russell. 4th Charles Leclerc.
Yeah.
3rd Max Verstappen. No, actually 3rd Oscar Piastri.
Yeah.
2nd Verstappen. 1st Norris.
So you're turning around and saying
on the basis that Red Bull go well in China every year anyway, regardless of whether their car's any good.
True. They won obviously with Ricardo with a tyre strategy, didn't they? In 2019.
And they won last year by I don't know how many miles last year, but without even breaking into a sweat. In fact, Sergio finished third on the podium last year in China.
Also,
that's how good they were in China last year.
That's how good Red Bull was. Liam Lawson to win then.
Yeah, exactly. Podium for Liam Lawson.
In the chat, we've got Closey saying Oscar will win.
Oscar will win.
So
he doesn't go well in China, by the way. Like, I'll give you a bit of a he needs to improve quite a lot this season. He finished in 8th last year in China, and he finished 43 seconds behind his teammate in the same car. Just saying.
Well, the other reason I've gone with Lewis to qualify okay is because Lewis got on the front row last year.
Yeah, he did, didn't he? Yeah. No,
of a sprint.
Not last year. Yeah, don't forget it's sprint weekend as well, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
he was 18th last year on the grid for the race.
So,
went out in Q1. Lewis.
So, what year was he on front row?
Don't know, but he went out in Q1 last year. I remember it distinctly. And his Sonoda and Sargent were slower than him.
Who am I on about?
Don't know, but it weren't Lewis. Mercedes were dog shit in China last year, if you remember.
I'm trying to remember about that for China. There we go.
On pace as well, it was that Hamilton went out.
So what?
I mean, it was something like the first time he'd gone out since Saudi Arabia the previous year, I think.
In sprint qualifying, races. He got second on the grid.
Yeah, that's what I said to you. I think he did in sprint, he did, but for the main race, he was 18th.
Yeah, and then I was already thinking it was kind of like result of a sprint dictates
no
the thing. So that's definitely not the plan. I've got for Wajid, George Russell 5th in the race, 4th Oscar Piastri. So expecting Piastri to either fall back or struggle compared to Norris, maybe. In 3rd place, Lando. Ooh. This is interesting.
Is this some Ferrari copium here going on?
Verstappen in 2nd.
And kickstarting his World Championship, Lewis Hamilton.
Verstappen. And in 1st place, he has got kickstarting his World Championship, Charles Leclerc. You knew that was coming.
I did.
Let's just have a look where I think we are. Where did I put Piastri on the grid 5th? So I think we're going to have Albon 5th. We're going to have
Risky.
We're going to have Russell 4th. Then Verstappen in 3rd. I'm going to say Hamilton will get 2nd because he does go well around China, even if last year's qualifying didn't say so.
Last year's qualifying and 2007 he went off at the final corner and blew his World Championship. Yeah, he goes well there.
Yeah, and in 1st place, Lando Norris.
Surely we've got to pick up some points this weekend.
You'll go.
Prediction points. Right. I'm going 5th, Liam Lawson.
Oh, yeah, I forgot he drives.
Yeah, Red Bull driver. He's really good. Yeah, 5th, Liam Lawson. 4th, George Russell.
Okay.
3rd, Verstappen. Second, Piastri.
Easier way of typing these all in.
Nice and easy.
Oh, yeah, I do have an easier way for him to type them all in. 2nd, who?
2nd, Piastri. 1st, Norris.
1st, Norris. So you're thinking McLaren?
Yeah.
dominating.
Yeah. Even if they don't put it off in quali, I think they'll be well ahead in the race.
Well, we can very much see that one. We don't normally predict it, but I'll throw it out there. Do you think the sprint's going to make any difference to the order, or do you think it's going to be...
No, I think we might see... I think it's a good opportunity for teams like Williams, for instance. I think Sainz might go well in the sprint, might be able to pick up a 5th or a 4th or something. And I think if he fights the other drivers in the top 4, they'll move out of the way because they won't want to risk damaging their car. So when you've got a driver like Sainz who's quick around China as well, and maybe a Bottas or maybe someone like not Bottas, an Albon or someone like Ocon, I think those drivers, if they're in the top sort of 8, 9 places, I think they could get quite feisty, and I think the other drivers will just jump out of the way because they won't want to have anything to do with them. I think they'll just all be happy that there's no Kevin Magnussen in the sprint this year.
I'm sure somebody can come in, take over his position.
We do need a new K-Mag, don't we?
Well, Ocon's there.
Yeah, he's very similar actually, but he only ever sorts his teammates. He doesn't really pick on other drivers.
So it's always which one's going to beat me? Oh, my teammate. Okay.
Yeah. How many accidents do you have with Gasly? 3. How many do you have with Perez? 3.
At least.
Who else has he had accidents with that's been a teammate? There's definitely going to be more. I think I saw a video somewhere that said he'd had 11 accidents in F1, 9 of which with teammates.
Possibly so. I'm just trying to think who he's actually been teammates
Yeah, I've been
with.
trying to think as well, but yeah.
Esteban Ocon. Luckily, I just press a button and he pops
Alonso,
up.
obviously. Coming together with Alonso.
He was at Renault in 2020.
With Hulkenberg. Danny Rick.
Danny Rick, yeah.
Didn't have any accidents with Danny Rick, though.
No.
But he did have them with Fernando, though, so there is that.
Yeah.
He had at least 1, maybe 2 with Fernando that I can remember.
There's actually one thing. I mean, a lot of people give Ocon a bit of shit, really, for his accidents and that. But he's the lowest he's ever scored in Formula 1 is 23 points, and that was last season.
Yeah, that was his worst season last year.
Yeah, he's been really consistent.
He's a 50-plus a season normally, isn't he?
Yeah. His lowest before that was 49 in 2018, and that was the year of Racing Point.
Because he always finishes. I can't remember what the positions were, but I think it's something like he always finishes between 8th and 12th in the World Championship every year until last year.
Yeah, pretty much.
He finished 8th to 12th every single year without fail.
We won't
when you
count.
think, he's been in there for 7 years. You're like, oh, actually, that's quite consistent then.
Yeah.
They included the season he won a race as well, though.
What's he known for? Crashing.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Well, crashing to his teammates is what he's well known for.
Yeah. So that means that this weekend, obviously, the Chinese Grand Prix, I will get the times up for people because they're probably confusing yet again.
Yeah, it's usually 3 o'clock local for qualifying and race, isn't it? Which is UTC +8.
I am now on it with my time. So this is in the UK. So people of Australian who are all laughing at us because we've got 6 Grand Prix at weird times. Free practice 1, 3:30 in the morning, UK time. Sprint qualifying 7:30. Bit more capable.
Sprint qualifying at 7:30.
Yeah, sprint qualifying 7:30
on Friday.
Sprint on Saturday at 3 a.m.
Yeah,
that's just a quick blitz. Get up and go back to sleep afterwards. Qualifying will be at 7 a.m. on the Saturday, and then the set race is at 7 a.m. Sunday.
Yes.
So that's the local time of 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
In China.
But you don't need to. Well, I mean, the problem is that there's no F2 or F3.
No.
So you can't fill in the gaps between, like, if
Probably
you go out for 3 o'clock
Porsche
to watch
Cup
the sprint.
Asia, maybe.
What's that?
Maybe Porsche Cup Asia.
I guess if that floats your boat. But yeah, for me, it's like I've got to wait 3 more weeks until I get Sakia for the F2 and the F3, which is really annoying.
We do have.
It starts, it's like yay, and then it's like another month.
We do have F1 Academy this weekend.
Oh, good.
Which some people want to watch and some people don't. Be interesting to see.
I would totally watch it if it was more competitive and it actually had some good drivers in it.
Yeah, I mean, this season they do have Nina Gadman, who we've seen in the Winter Series go okay, and also wasn't too bad last year.
Yeah.
Just Alicia Palmwhisky from GB4.
I do like Alicia. I think she's very good. She won races last year in GB3 as well.
Yeah.
GB3 or GB4?
I want to say 4, but it might be.
Yeah,
3.
I think it might have been 4, actually. I can't remember now. But she won the opener last year. She was very good. Yeah, she's very good.
Dorian Pan's back.
Yeah, Dorian Pan I rate a lot, but she did not go well. I think she's better in sports cars, personally.
Here we go. She was in GB4. She was vice champion.
Yeah. And she was with runner-up there, we used to call those.
Yes.
She was with the yellow team. What are the yellow team called in GB4?
I can't remember.
Elite.
Yeah.
She was driving for Elite. Yeah.
So that is on there if you want to watch it. F1 Academy. Yeah. We'll obviously be keeping up with results of that and whether we have the next woman F1 driver in there or not. I'll be surprised if it actually probably doesn't come from there and it comes through other routes, but
it'll come from other routes. I mean, don't forget these are basically Formula 4 cars. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you've got drivers going into F1 Academy driving in Formula 4, and if they get out of that, then they would either go to FRECA or they go to Formula 3. And so far, we've not seen a single driver make it into either of those two elements. And the only one that's had any reasonable success, of course, is Jamie Chadwick, who had to go to America to get it and was in Indy Next.
And now works for Sky Sports because she didn't get the IndyCar drive.
Because she couldn't get a drive. So it's like,
and I don't think Abby Pullen's gone into anything this season.
No.
So, not ideal advertisement for F1 Academy, but
they need. On the other hand, I will say this, right? I learned this from other women who have been talking to me in a previous life about esports and about holding, women's championships in esports, and it's the same theory, right? They don't have anything, therefore they can't do anything. So to get recognition, they need recognition. Yeah, it's the classic. I need experience to get the job that I want, but I can't get experience without doing the job that I want. But I need experience to do the job. It's the same thing, right? So we have to give a platform. So I'm not against Formula W or F1 Academy or any of those female-only or women-only races. I'm not against that at all because right now they need them because there's no other way of them getting any funding or recognition. But at some point, I hope that we don't have to have these championships because they can stand on their own 2 feet and they can be treated equally and they can get jobs and drives in relatively easily because they've got the pace to do so and not because they're a woman. The problem we've had is that several women, unfortunately, through no fault of their own either, have hurt the system. And by that, I mean, we've had ladies like Tatiana Calderon, who wasn't good enough for Formula 3, got given a Formula 2 drive because she was a woman, not because she was quick enough, but because she was a woman. And that's basically active discrimination. I don't like that. And what it also does is it gives women a bad... It's almost like someone gave her that job so that she could fail, so that they could prove that women couldn't drive in Formula 2, which is rubbish. There are several women out there that could definitely do a good job in Formula 3 and maybe even get into Formula 2. She was given that Formula 2 role and she was 3 seconds slower than the slowest guy. So, of course, she failed miserably. So now everyone says, can't put women in Formula 2 cars, they're too slow. Based on one experience that was given to someone that wasn't ready for it. She also got given an IndyCar drive, and she was 2 seconds slower than the slowest guy in IndyCars last year. So it's ruined that road as well for someone that is talented like Jamie Chadwick. It's really frustrating to watch. It really is.
I think also on that one, you've got obviously... Going back a little bit further, Susie Wolff got the Williams test drive. She wasn't a terrible driver, to be fair. And who was the Renault one? Who was Karma Jordan?
Yes, she wasn't very good though.
Yeah, she was like terrible on the sim for Renault, yet was kept into the job for that role model position.
I've just had a thought though. Abby Pulling is doing a full season of GB3 because that was her prize for winning.
Oh yes,
F1 Academy, wasn't it?
So she should be, yeah.
Yeah, so she should be in GB3 this season.
I will just have a quick look, so I don't want to.
Because that was the prize for winning F1. Otherwise, what's the point in driving in F1 Academy? But here's the weird thing, right? You're driving in F1 Academy, which is F1, like F1 Academy, amazing, right? And actually, your prize is to go and do GB3, which is below FRECA and below Formula 4. Well, actually, probably on the same level as Formula 4, but below FRECA, below Formula 3, and below Formula 2. So it's like the 5th level.
Yeah.
And that's actually being kind.
I mean, there's 15 drivers signed up for GP3 at the moment.
Is she in it?
Yes, she is in it, as is Bianca Bustamante.
Yeah, I knew she was going to do it this year as well. There's another one as well from last year's GP4. What was her name? I can't remember.
I don't know. That's the only two in GB4 who
is
also
that the only one listed, is it? Okay.
Freddie Slater's down for racing in it as well.
Yeah, he did GB4 last year though.
I'm surprised he's staying in GB3. I thought he might have made a bigger step than that. GB4 has Lily Mae Watkins, Megan Bruce.
Megan Bruce is who I was thinking of.
Holly
is she
Nile,
in GB4 or is she? I thought she was doing GB3.
And Ava
okay, I mean they've all shown flashes that they can actually be quick. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean the one thing I'll be interested in is there's Isaac Phelps in there who have seen karts quite a bit, but also Dayton Coulthard wasn't the guy to get results in go-karting, so it'd be interesting to see how he gets on because sometimes it works that way.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, no, it doesn't always translate that great karters become great drivers in cars, and likewise, it doesn't always translate. I mean, Emil Bernsdorf was not a great karter by his own admission, but he was a brilliant single-seater driver.
I don't know. I've karted against him, and I couldn't keep up.
I mean, he's good. Don't get me wrong; he's good at kart, but he's not. He wasn't as good.
I'm not saying I'm a standard before anybody jumps at that. But anyway, Chinese Grand Prix this weekend. Sorry. Completely sidetracked. We've managed to get to about an hour, then we sidetracked. Next week, hopefully, Wajid will be able to join us. Paul, thank you for joining us again.
Yeah,
and
always
hopefully
a
pleasure. You get the point on board next week.
I hope so. I'm already behind.
Only by one.
Could have been worse. I've basically had a Ferrari weekend, haven't I? I've got away with it.
Exactly. You got away with one there. If you want to watch any more of our podcasts, so obviously on the YouTube channel, and please subscribe for the algorithm for YouTube. And if you want to follow on Twitch as well, you can follow me at Motorsport Magpie and Paul at Red Eye. And you can enjoy watching the paints be done.
Yeah.
It is actually
at Red Eye on Twitch.
Watching Red Eye is like watching paint dry.
It literally is.
It literally is. Yeah. And it's actually quite entertaining. And we have some good conversations.
We do get sidetracked a lot.
And we just had a follow over here from Lord Hands.
Lord Hands. Hello, Lord Hands.
Do you know Lord Hands?
I do know Lord Hands. Lord Hands is a Twitch frequenter.
Ah, okay. Thank you. I never know where they come from sometimes, so it's always nice to know. But for this week, that is it. And we will see you same time next week when we review the Chinese Grand Prix. And do we have to predict the next one as well already? Probably. I can't quite remember. I will just have a look now.
Oh, no. Yeah, we do. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
another one
Japan.
After, yeah.
Is it? No, it's not week after, is it?
I thought we had 3 in 3 weeks when we started.
No, 29th, 30th, those in the race.
Okay.
And then it's Japan, Bahrain, Saudi, all in a row.
Right, okay, so those 3 in a row, fair enough.
So maybe we'll just do a prediction at the start for all 3. And then just...
We'd probably score more points, wouldn't we?
Well, yeah, we'll just give it a go. But on that note, we will see you very soon. And if you have missed it, like Lord Hands, who says hi now, as we're just going, you can head back on the YouTube channel and watch it all there. So for now, goodbye.